right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this presentation today. A few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and the recording link will be emailed to all attendees and registrants. This presentation is an educational service by Sophie Alcorn, and the information discussed should not be construed as legal advice for any specific action. Please be sure to consult a knowledgeable professional with assistance for your particular issue. And lastly, if you have any questions, you may use Zoom's Q&A function below. And I believe there is a poll today as well. And you will also find the way to submit your answers down there too. And these questions are shared publicly, so please do not share any sensitive or personal information and submit them anonymously. And it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Sophie Alcorn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex, and welcome to everybody today to Immigration from Farm to Green Card. This is a special webinar only for Stanford alumni. And it's so great having you here today. As I introduce myself, we're also going to be launching a Zoom poll so that I can find out more about you. So you should see the Zoom poll pop up in your Zoom interface. And there's 4 simple questions. I just want to get to know you. What's your highest degree? Where are you in terms of like when you graduated? Where are you from? And what's your goal for today? And that will help me as we move forward. We also have a Stanford disclaimer. This is just all a personal volunteer offering from me, Sophie Alcorn, and my law firm, Alcorn Immigration Law, and Stanford is in no way responsible for whatever I am about to say to you. So I just like to include that whenever I speak to Stanford groups as well. As you continue to fill out that poll, we have about half of the people who've responded so far. So if everybody could please take a look at that. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. In addition to founding Alcorn Immigration Law, I'm a TechCrunch author, and I write a weekly immigration advice education column called Ask Sophie, which is in TechCrunch every Wednesday. So you're welcome to read it there. You can also find all of my library of hundreds of TechCrunch articles for free on our website, alcorn.law. And I'm a Stanford grad. Go Card, fear the tree, or you know, whatever. It sounds funny to say it now, but my Stanford story is I got my bachelor's degree in international relations. I was an undergrad, class of 05, and I really, really loved my time on the farm, so much so that I recently moved back to Palo Alto, and I love just hanging out on campus. Definitely changed my life being able to attend Stanford. It was an incredible opportunity. And these are some pictures of when I was a student. God, this was 18 years ago when I was graduating in June of 2005. My commencement, it was before the stadium was rebuilt. And I think I was living in Casa Italiana, the Italian theme house that year. I had studied abroad in Florence, Italy, and Moscow, Russia. And I also took a lot of German classes. And at some point, I knew I wanted to help people from all around the world make a better life for themselves. I didn't yet know I would become an immigration lawyer. But at some point, in order to graduate on time, I just had to pick a major, any major, and came to international relations. And that led to me being here today. And other fun fact, and thank you to everybody who completed the poll. But 18 years ago this month was my commencement. At my commencement, that was the famous Steve Jobs speech, where, you know, he said, stay hungry and stay foolish, and it was really inspiring. And recently I realized I'm in the recording. I was like in the, you know, front row somewhere. And I just remember thinking, why is this college dropout giving my Stanford graduation commencement speech? And I was like, if he can build iPods, you know, like anybody can do that. So anyway, now I've realized what an amazing transformative figure he was and how everything he did has shaped Stanford and Silicon Valley and this, legacy of tech that we've all been immersed in being at Stanford within the last 20 years. So very powerful. But yeah, that's my claim to fame there in that Steve Jobs video. So thank you so much for everybody who took the time to fill out the poll. I really appreciate it. Today's talk is really for any alumni who simply want the freedom to live and work in the United States. So taking a look at the poll, let me tell you about you guys here today. Most of you have an advanced degree. The majority of you have a master's degree, at least. Some of you also have a PhD. Many of you are either about to graduate or you've graduated within the last 1 to 5 years. So that's wonderful. Congratulations. Several of you are from China, India, and Mexico. Others from around the world as well. So welcome. And you're here for different reasons. Some of you want to get a visa independently of an employer. Some of you want to get it independently of getting married. Some of you want to speed up your green card process. So this is perfect. We're going to have lots of information today that's going to be helpful for you. Many of the immigration options based on your accomplishments don't require you to have your own company. You don't need to be a startup founder. You can do it in the context of your current employment. And they don't require you to have $1 million or get married to a US citizen. So let's dive in. All right. Okay, so it doesn't really matter for any of these options whether you have graduated yet. Look, even if you drop out of Stanford, I think if you complete 1 year at the GSB, they'll still allow you to call yourself a Stanford alum. But even if you drop out, it's okay. Or if you never go on to pursue that PhD, it's okay. In the startup world, I work with a lot of startup founders. It doesn't even matter for them if there's a minimum viable product or if the company got any funding or if there's product market fit or if it has any sort of unicorn valuation or if you work for a startup. None of these things actually matter. And certainly you do not need anything remotely close to a Nobel Prize. So, the title of this webinar, From Farm to Green Card, How to Avoid Stanford Duck Syndrome. That was a ChatGPT generated webinar title. I wanted to see what I could do. But anyway, I got inspired. I'm like, okay, Stanford's the farm. So we're going to have a lot of farm food to table pictures. But also the other part of that, Stanford Duck Syndrome, it's a real thing. And for those of you who haven't heard about it, I definitely experienced it during my undergrad, Stanford Duck Syndrome, but it's this idea that when you see ducks floating peacefully across a pond, they look so calm, the water is so smooth, it's so effortless, it's so graceful. And you think, wow, that must be so easy for that duck to swim. If only I could swim as gracefully as that duck, smoothly gliding across the water. But if you actually went below the surface and looked at the little duck feet under the water, the duck is paddling furiously. And it's kind of just an illusion of what's happening above the surface. You wouldn't know what's happening beneath the surface unless you looked. And so people threw around that metaphor when I was an undergrad. I think it's still used, but the basic idea is you're probably working your butt off, but it doesn't necessarily look like that to anybody else because you pull it off effortlessly and gracefully. But don't let imposter syndrome get to you. Even if you think you're at the beginning of your career trajectory, and we're going to talk about this a lot today, but there are a lot of things you can do that can happen in other countries if you had to leave the US and you want to come back. So things you can do abroad to be able to come back on your own terms with a visa or a green card. And there's also stuff you can do, even if you're on OPT or STEM OPT, or if you're like on an H-1B at a company, there are things you can do that will allow you to maintain your current visa status and like not, for example, run afoul of any like employment laws saying that you're only authorized to work for one employer. There's lots of legal non-work volunteer opportunities that you can do to build up your own portfolio of achievements to be able to qualify for visas and green cards on your own. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So don't let imposter syndrome get to you. Don't let fear of visa stuff get to you. There are tons of ways to do this legally and get freedom. So that's what we're going to talk about. So do you want a seat at the table? That is what we're going to be talking about today, how to get your own seat at the table in the US and be able to live here legally, work here legally, build your professional future, start a family here, buy a house, you know, rise up a corporate ladder or build your own thing, or, you know, become post-economic and follow a lifetime of art and poetry. These things are all possible. So we're going to talk about how to do it. All right, so the first section of today's program is going to be about visas, and then we are going to be talking about green cards. So visas are short-term temporary work authorization that allow you to be in the United States for a specific purpose and for a specific duration, and to engage in a specific set of permissible activities. And this is where we get the alphabet soup of visas. So A visas for ambassadors, B visas for visitors, F visas for students, J visas for exchange visitors, H-1B visas for professional workers, O visas for extraordinary ability. We're going to be talking a lot about a lot today. So many of these visas are non-immigrant, and you have to intend to leave at the end of your program, like an F1, like you didn't get your F1 visa by saying, oh, I love America, I want to live there forever, I want a green card, and I want to earn lots of money and become rich and live the American dream. If you say that as an F1 student, you are going to get your visa denied so quickly. You had to show, oh, look, here's my family's assets, here's our bank accounts, here's how my parents are going to pay. I'm definitely going to go back to, you know, Venezuela at the end of my degree or something, right? That's you have to have non-immigrant intent to qualify as an F1 student to come here. But they're all different, right? So there are many visas that are either dual intent or allow you to seek a green card while you're waiting. So they're often the first step for people to just get some sort of independence in the United States, either because you want to build your own thing or simply because there's been tech layoffs and you don't want your status to be dependent on an employer. So typically, it takes about 6 to 9 months to get some sort of US work visa. It's on the shorter end if the visa you want is eligible for something called premium processing, which is available for many types of visas. At the visa level, it shortens the processing time from like a year down to 15 days. And this can take longer if you need to get a visa stamped in your passport abroad, like a visa foil, which they literally like glue into your passport. And that's the colorful page that you show anytime you get on an airplane or come into the country. So it just depends, if you're outside the US and you're getting a new visa, it can require, you can opt in sometimes for premium processing, but then you have to schedule your visa appointment abroad. Or if you're in the States, you can do a change of status and not leave. But then the next time you go on a trip, you would need a new visa to come back in that status. So, typically 6 to 9 months, depending on if you're inside or outside the United States, and assuming you're using premium processing. Let's talk about extraordinary ability and O1 visas. There are many things that are awesome about O1 visas. The biggest is Oh, there's a lot of really wonderful things. There's no minimum wage, and you can be self-employed, and there's no lottery. Those, I think, are the three most important reasons. There's a lot of other reasons that people get O1 visas, like if you're from India or China, it can be a very beneficial first step into proving your eligibility eventually for the fastest type of green card, which is an EB1A green card. So O1s are great. Whenever I start talking about this is where groups of Stanford students and Stanford grads start freaking out because they're like, I'm not extraordinary. I'm like, actually, you are. You've already made it into Stanford. In the whole scheme of things, of the whole population of planet Earth, you probably already have extraordinary ability, even if you're at the beginning of your personal and professional accomplishments. And even if you think, you know, the horizon of what I want to achieve is way far out in the future one day, and I'm still at the beginning of my journey, you know, the fact that you're about to graduate from Stanford, or you recently graduated from Stanford, you had to do a lot of stuff to get in. And yes, the degree in and of itself is not sufficient to get an O1, but I'm sure that you have already racked up many professional and educational, academic and personal accomplishments on this path in order to qualify. So another thing that I really like about an O1, and then we're going to talk about the criteria and how to qualify. But one of the things lately that we've been doing more for more of our clients is, instead of filing an O1 on behalf of a specific employer that is planning to offer a full-time W-2 style job to the individual O1 beneficiary in the United States, we have been filing O1s with an agent. I'm going to share my contact information at the end of this, but I'm just going to put my email in the chat window right now in case anybody needs more help. But one of the things that I would like to do systematically one day, but that we're doing as one-offs right now, is this agent petitioned O1 process. The benefit is you can file your O1 with the purpose of allowing you to be self-employed or have multiple streams of income after it's approved. So whereas an H-1B visa, for example, would only permit you to work at a single company, and you have to go through the lottery, and you're only allowed to have one job, and you're not supposed to be inventing other things on the side or working for other companies, and you can't get paid. Let's see, like people might get offered speaking gigs and 1099 contractor payment, or you know, if you're in athletics, maybe you are going to be part of some like photo shoot of athletes that the university or some other organization or sports team, you know, wants to make money off of your image, right? Or if you are in the startup space, maybe your friends are begging you to become an advisor in their startup and they want to offer you advisory shares. There's tons of types of things that people would love to be able to do professionally that avail themselves of other sources of income. Maybe you want to write a book and get income from that. All of that would be employment. Even it's really dicey setting up a startup legally if you are not authorized to be employed at more than one company. And also, it jeopardizes your company, right? Because most big tech companies, if you're working there right now, you had to sign some sort of confidential invention and information assignment, CIIA or PIIA, like NDA / everything I invent belongs to my employer document when you started working there. So it's risky to start a startup when you're currently employed at a big company, especially if your future endeavor is going to get big fast. So anyway, having an O1 would allow you to do all of this. The thing is, you have to get clear with yourself about what types of opportunities you want to eventually have, so that when we're preparing the O1, you can list all of that in the document, but we can, write it in a broad way, so that you can, have some flexibility. But, recent case study, somebody from India who was working at a tech company as an employee on an H-1B knew that eventually he wanted to get an EB-1A for extraordinary ability in fintech because that was his field. And he wasn't ready to go off and raise money and create the new startup yet, but he did want to have different avenues of eventually, bypassing the whole employer perm, EB2, EB3 corporate green card process and having a faster turn in line with the EB1. So first we did a change of status from H-1B to O1 through his current employer, that only authorized him to work at his current employer, but then also to do additional types of things that would help him build up his credentials for an EB-1A. After we got that approved, he wanted to do a change of petitioner. So he actually had a friend in fintech who offered to be his agent, who did an O1 transfer. And we included the current corporate job as something on the itinerary. So he was able to continue working there. And he simply got a new approval, and then he wasn't dependent on the company's HR and immigration sponsorship anymore. And then his friend was doing it. And then we actually just filed the EB-1 and that got approved in 9 days. So it provided a lot of peace of mind to him and we were able to say, USCIS, he had multiple O1s approved already. He's clearly extraordinary. Look at all the other stuff he's done in this fintech company. So now with his EB-1 approved and his O1 in hand, and he's just waiting for his spot in line, now he can go off and build his own new project with a lot of freedom. So start with the end in mind. If you want to be able to do a bunch of cool things to make money, and maybe you need to build up your portfolio of accomplishments to self-sponsor a green card. And if you're from India or China, then you need to look at the EB-1 category because it's faster. Having an O1 is an amazing first stepping stone because you can also work for multiple places. All right, so let's talk about what the O1 actually requires. And if you have questions, you can totally put them in the Q&A panel. It's not going to be anonymous unless you can change your name to, there's a way to do it for anonymous attendees. So just whatever you want to put in there is fine, but it's going to be public. But yeah, feel free to add questions to the Q&A panel as we go through all of this. And we're going to be focusing on O's, and then we're going to get to green cards in a minute, and then I'll leave time for more Q&A at the end. So, okay, what does it actually take to do an O1? It's an application that's, 20 or 30 pages of government forms that your lawyer will put together for you, plus typically hundreds of pages of evidence, including a 10 to 30 page letter written by a lawyer about how amazing you are. Now, you don't actually have to be amazing according to the standards of your chosen profession, in that an engineer will have a very different standard for, I don't know how many GitHub commits are good, or how many, how elegant the code is, or how easily scalable the technology is, right? So the government has its own set of standards for what makes you extraordinary within your field. And oftentimes the things that the government is looking for might feel false, hollow, silly, irrelevant to the standards of your professional field, but it's very much the law, and it's very much what the government requires. And it's just, put yourself in the shoes of a 1960s lawmaker pre-internet. They just thought, okay, if somebody is extraordinary, they're going to have newspaper articles written about them. They're going to win awards. They're going to judge competitions in their field. They're going to be an author. People are going to cite to their work. That's the framework that we're working with. So the good news is, if you don't have these things yet, they do not necessarily involve doing any unauthorized employment. You can get all of them done for free as a volunteer, and you can build up your accomplishments. And this Biden-Harris administration is very amenable towards people, especially in the STEM fields, as well as entrepreneurship. So if you think you want an O1, I would strongly encourage you to do whatever it takes to become qualified now, so that you can get an approval with premium processing before the potential end of this 4-year term of Biden, because we don't know what the future holds and we don't know which administration is coming next. So if there is another, Democrat administration, maybe things will keep being good for immigrants for 4 years, but we can't guarantee that. So I would say now is the time to build up your accomplishments if you need more of them. So you need 3 out of these 8. You do not need all 8. If you have 4 or 5, that can be really helpful. So this is an educational webinar, and I am, the point is not for me to share my law firm services, but there are ways where you can get an evaluation of what you have accomplished thus far. For example, a complimentary review of a questionnaire, so that you have some basis of knowing, okay, how far am I? Because of this Stanford imposter syndrome thing, I've had many experiences over the years. We've helped hundreds and hundreds of people from the Stanford community, but many people come to me and they're like, okay, so non-Stanford people, I see more of one scenario, and Stanford people, I see more of another scenario. The non-Stanford scenario I see is, oh my God, I'm so famous, get me an O1 right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you have like 1 or maybe 2 of the criteria, but you kind of need to do some more work before you're qualified. And they're like, oh, can I just pay you? And I'm like, I'm sorry, you have to actually, do these things. Like when you get into Business Insider or Forbes or TechCrunch, let me know, and then we'll talk about next steps. But you have some work to do, and I don't feel comfortable accepting your case right now. So that's one scenario. That's not common with Stanford community. Typically, when we talk to people from Stanford, it's more like, oh my gosh, I only have 4, maybe 5. I don't know. I have all this work that I still need to do. I'm about to publish these papers, or I'm still coding on my MVP, but like, there's so many amazing things I'm going to do in the future, but I don't know if I should apply now. And so more often it's like, look, you are already eminently qualified. Let's do this now. We don't have to base it on your professional end game. We merely have to have enough to satisfy the government requirements from the government perspective. You actually can qualify now or in the near future. And I've had people, one client in particular, wasn't qualified, but she was super motivated, and she did everything she needed to bridge that gap within 6 weeks. I have a class on our website for that called Extraordinary Ability Bootcamp, but this was even before I made that class. And what she did was she was a product manager at Facebook from China, and I don't know, she may have hired a ghostwriter, but she talked her way into getting like 8 product management articles published in an online Chinese product management newspaper, got them published, got them translated, and we got a bunch of letters of recommendation for her, and we were able to tie in what she had done in her big tech job into these categories, as well as some academic research she had done in the space. And we positioned her as like a top product management expert from China, essentially. And not only did she get approved immediately, but a couple of years later, I was like, yeah, how was that process for you? I know that was kind of annoying and you had to do some stuff to get it done, but are you happy with having, now a green card, and how's everything? And she's like, Oh my God, Sophie. Yeah. The article is like, I hate writing, but I got it done. And do you know what? I got a regular column in that newspaper, and then I got a book deal. And then my book became a bestseller in China. So now I have this book that everybody reads. So it was really exciting to see that doing this stuff, even if it can be painful and awkward, if you don't like writing, or you're an engineer, or you're scared, like if you just get yourself through this, you don't actually know how it's going to affect the rest of your life. It can actually be super helpful. And obviously I'm American. My mom's from Germany. My dad was an immigration lawyer. But before I started my law firm here in Silicon Valley, I was a stay-at-home mom and out of the workforce. Even though I was a lawyer, like I didn't work for almost 5 years. And I knew that I wanted to have a law firm where I got to work with people from Stanford who wanted to make the world a better place and who were really motivated and brilliant. And I had imposter syndrome about whether I would qualify to be a smart enough lawyer to help people in the Stanford community. I was like, okay, I just have to treat myself like my clients. And if I'm making them get through this O1 stuff, I have to be able to get through this O1 stuff. So I'm just gonna do my best to become qualified for like an EB1A as an immigration lawyer. And obviously I don't need a green card, but I'm gonna hold myself to that standard so I know if I can expect it of others. And this was actually my marketing plan for my law firm 8 years ago in my kitchen when I got started. And because of this checklist, and I really internalized it, that's how I ended up writing for TechCrunch, and was able to create a strong brand for my law firm, which is now, able to help more people as a result of it. So if you do these things, there are ways where it can come back to help you that you can't even imagine. All right. And, you're in good company and you're not alone. And I don't know if any of you want to be founders actually, but if you're tempted, if you're like, well, if only I had the immigration freedom, then I would let myself consider it. Know that you are in good company. Over half the unicorns have at least one immigrant founder. And I mean, America needs you. It takes a lot of grit, resilience, determination to get through this system. But you are the people that are helping us, push the world forward, saving lives, new technologies, helping the environment, national security. There's so many amazing technological breakthroughs all the time around here. And it's really because of you guys. So I hope you go down this path. There's a few other types of visas that you can leverage that may be interesting or relevant besides the O1 that I just want to flag for your attention. If you had to go back home to your home country after Stanford, maybe to take care of a relative or other responsibilities, but you want to find your way back to the United States, if you set up your own real company abroad that does business and you want to eventually create a new Silicon Valley office one day, or New York or office or Austin or whatever, you can do that. So in this example, if you're from Italy, and you had an Italian, let's say you had to go back home and help your grandma or something for a few years after Stanford, but you want to come back and you've been building a tech product in AI near the university in Milan or something, but now you want to come back and raise money from US VCs or have a US sales and marketing office, you can set up your own company that will qualify for an L1 transfer, which is for executives and people with specialized knowledge to move from one branch of your company to another. So that's something to take advantage of if you ever find yourself out of the United States. Another option is E2 investor visas. You do have to have citizenship of a particular country. Here are the countries that qualify. So if you're from China and you immigrated to Canada and you have a Canadian passport, you can do it. If you're from India and you immigrated to Australia and you have an Australian passport, you can do it. So country of birth does not matter. It's country of citizenship that matters. So basically, if you have citizenship in one of these countries and you start a company in the United States and you invest capital or like money or IP, that's in the range of $60K. I would say like $200,000 is good. You can get an E2 investor visa or an E2 visa as an essential employee, and run the company. So, you could be a Sri Lankan citizen, working for Microsoft, and you can have your 150K of savings, and you could start your own company in Seattle and get an E2 visa and switch away from your H-1B at Microsoft and run your company. And from there, you could go get a green card one day. So there's a lot of ways to do this. There are also other country-specific work visas. Now, these are more likely to be non-immigrant intent, where you're not supposed to get a green card. And they're more likely to be employer specific. So if you end up starting a company with a co-founder and you want to leave your day job and go work there, you could have your co-founder sponsor you, like as the CTO or chief marketing officer. But it's a little more challenging to be the CEO at a new company for one of these visas. But I believe we had some individuals from Mexico and maybe Canada on today's webinar. So there's special visas, E3 for Australians, TN for Canadians, H1B1 for Chile, TN for Mexico, and H1B1 for Singapore. So just keep those in mind. There may be ways to like, if you're on OPT and you're working for a big tech company and that you don't get selected for an H1B, if you have one of these citizenships, you can get a company to sponsor you for one of these types of visas. Okay, before we go to green cards, on that note, I do just want to flag one more thing, which is a H1B without the lottery. Sometimes Stanford students who attend my webinars are happy with their employer, but they're running out of time on STEM OPT, or they don't qualify for STEM OPT, and the regular OPT is running out. And the employer has done a good faith job of putting them in the H-1B lottery every year, but like this year, they just didn't get selected because there's 85,000 H-1Bs. And I think this year, 780,000 people applied. It had been hovering around 300K historically, but it like more than doubled this year. There's a lot of demand for H-1Bs. So the selection rate decreased to like 10 or 15%. So just as an aside, if you have a job you're happy with and they want to sponsor you and you don't yet qualify for an O1, but you need a way to stay in the US, there is a way to get H-1Bs without the lottery to work for a private employer. It's through a fellowship. So you as the beneficiary have to commit to teaching US college students for 5 hours a week on project-based learning that's related to your job. Your company will nominate you to be a global talent fellow at a nonprofit called Open Avenues that we work with that runs this thing. They'll get you an H-1B for 5 hours a week to do that work, helping students through the nonprofit. Because it's a nonprofit, they don't have to go through the lottery. And then once you have that H-1B approved, your company can sponsor you for a second concurrent full-time H-1B. That's not the only way to do it. There are many types of CAP exempt institutions. So for example, Stanford Hospital is a nonprofit affiliated with the university. So if you got even a part-time job there, they don't have to put people through the H-1B lottery to employ them. There are also nonprofit research institutions that qualify and some other types of government organizations. So there's a lot of ways to get H-1Bs without the lottery if that is what you need. Okay. Now we're going to go to green cards, and the green cards that you can self-petition. And so if you're happy with your H-1B at your company right now and you like your job, but it's just they're going to do perm and like put you in EB3 and you're from India, you're like, actually, I need a green card faster. I really want to go for EB1. We're going to talk about how to self-petition green cards now. Or if you're from, I don't know, Tunisia, and you're like, well, I just want a green card and I'm on the beginning of my OPT and I still have STEM OPT and I like this company and I don't need to be a founder yet, but I wish I just didn't have to ask my company to do the green card for me. Those are some of the scenarios that can be met by these solutions. I've even had Stanford people in their postdoc do this, or even students well before they graduate. You are allowed as an F1 student, as long as you're in the country and you didn't have immigrant intent like when you're coming in. If you're on F1, it's best if you don't have international travel plans, but assuming you don't, you can just potentially go through the whole green card process by yourself before your STEM OPT even ends, if you time it right and you choose the right categories strategically. Okay, so yeah, so you can self-petition your green card while you're working, which we talked about, while you're studying, which we talked about, or even if you're abroad. So this is that other scenario. Like, let's say you graduated from Stanford 8 years ago and you went home, and then this pandemic happened, and then you got laid off, and now you can't come back in, and you're trying to find another job here, but they're not going to do visa sponsorship, and it's annoying, and you're just trying to find a way to come back. But maybe you have a spouse and kids in your home country now, and you don't know when you actually want to return. So it is also possible to get a green card from your home country. You do not have to be in the US to get a green card. You do not have to do the adjustment of status process. You can actually do the immigrant visa process. So once I helped a Russian astronaut who had teenage kids, and he wanted them to get green cards to have in-state tuition, but he didn't want to mess around with getting an O1B in the short term. He just wanted his whole family to be able to immigrate from Russia to the United States with green cards before the kids started college, so that they would just have one transition and not have to deal with visa renewals. That is completely possible. So if you're, home working in Lagos and you want to come back to the US in 2-3 years, like, you could just do the whole green card process from Nigeria. Or, you could get a visa, come back, work here, and then do your green card process in parallel. So there's lots of ways to start the green card. And there's lots of types of green cards. The 90-day fiance version of marrying an American, there's immediate relative green cards, there's family green cards, there's also a green card lottery. And in the green card lottery, people from countries with low levels of immigration are able to put themselves in every year, and maybe your number will get called. So that happens, but they're not really, I don't know, it's kind of random. You want to be able to know, here's the checklist, I've completed all the steps, and I can just simply have a high level of confidence that this will go through, and then I'll be able to get my green card. You want predictability. So in the employment-based realm, there is more predictability in green cards. And there's kind of a high level between company-sponsored and self-sponsored. And yes, there's also EB-5, which is like $800,000, I believe. But if you have, they just changed the EB-5 rules so that you can concurrently file your petition along with your I-485 adjustment of status application, which is nice because then you can get a work permit, combo card, and travel document. But the returns on EB-5 investments aren't that great. And for that amount of money, you could easily become qualified, hire, I don't know, job coaches and PR people and people to help you write articles. There's a lot of stuff you could invest in to build up your professional brand and accomplishments and be able to qualify for a self-sponsored employment-based green card, which we're now going to talk about, which is the EB-1A for extraordinary ability and the EB-2 NIW National Interest Waiver green card. So the EB-1A is like the O-1A. It's for extraordinary ability, but it's held to a higher standard. So that's typically why I advise people, even if the O1 isn't necessary, if you have to get an EB-1 because you are subject to the backlogs on green cards for people born in India or China, it can be a good idea to get an O1 first. I've had more pushback for even high up people in big tech companies who are on H-1Bs, if they try to go straight from an H-1B to an EB-1 from like a corporate job ladder, it's harder. But if they go to an O-1 first, it's more time, it's more money, it's another step. But I find that the EB-1 is easier after you have an O-1. So if you're not subject to the India or China backlogs, we're going to talk about an easier category for you. But if you are in the India and China line, you probably need to do an EB-1. It's very similar to an O-1, but you have to show sustained national or international acclaim. So it's like just doing those O-1 accomplishments in your field for longer. And here are those categories to remind you, and there's the sustained acclaim prong. So same thing, 3, in this case, there's 10 because they have 2 more for arts. But awards in different competitions that are professional. You could win a hackathon, you could win a pitch competition, you could get investment from a VC. All of those things can qualify as awards. We want you to be a member of associations that are hard to get into. So being on like a IEEE steering committee for AI standards, advising the federal government on how to make AI policy, that would be awesome. You can apply to be in Forbes Council and pay a membership fee, and Forbes Council works, and then you can publish articles. Having media coverage about you, like, yes, a full-length feature interview as Times Person of the Year with a cover shot would be amazing, but even getting quoted or having your technology written about in Business Insider or TechCrunch. I've had startups with like only 2 articles about them where the founders have gotten this. You can become a judge. There are lots of competitions that you can judge. It's a little trickier if you're doing like, if you're on like an internal review committee for a company for who gets promotions. It's better if you can judge hackathons, pitch competitions, coding contests, country-specific incubator and accelerator competitions. There's so many competitions. So just figure out your field and figure out competitions and then email them and say, hey, do you need a judge sometimes? I'm happy to help. You can't just get invited. You actually have to do it. So if people are inviting you and you're like, no, I'm too busy, stop turning those invitations down, like actually follow through and get proof that you did it, like a thank you email or a photo. What you created matters. So if you're listed on patents, that's helpful. If you are, any type of intellectual property you're creating, or new businesses you're creating, or new ways of doing things, all of that matters. Writing articles and getting them published can count. If you want to try to write a detailed 1,000 to 1,500 word how-to article for TechCrunch Plus, I can send that to my editor and try to help you get something published. Being a leader in a company or other type of scientific group or artistic group or something, that can also help. And having a high level of compensation, which could be salary, but it could be stock options, it could be a bonus plan, it could be the valuation of your startup. So all these things are helpful, but remember, you only need 3. So don't freak out if you don't have all of them. It is totally okay. Pick the ones that are easy, maximize those, get really strong in them, and then you can qualify. And somebody asked a question that I think is relevant for this slide. And if you have any more questions, now is the time to definitely put them in the Q&A panel, because we're going to come to the end of our time together soon. But somebody asks, my area is different from my job. I work in tech strategy and operations, but publish fiction and poetry in magazines around the world. Is there an issue with the mismatch in my career? No, it's totally fine. So in order to help you, I would ask questions like, okay, what's your goal? If you want to have a goal of getting a green card to be able to be a full-time writer and quit your day job, that's a different goal than I want to create a tech startup next week on the way to getting my green card independence, right? So in one scenario, we might want to build an EB1 or an O1 around poetry and fiction. And in another scenario, we might want to focus on your tech accomplishments. The main thing from a legal strategic perspective is, like, for your the visa is going to be, the visa or green card will enable you to live in the US and work in the US, or not work in the US and just not work. So if your strength is really the writing and you know you want a green card one day, then if we do the green card for you being a writer, then you're supposed to continue to write after the green card. But you'd have a work permit and you could do other stuff as well along the way. So I don't know, it depends on what country you're from, but these are the conversations we love to have with people, and you can tell how unique and amazing it is, but you might be able to qualify for 201s. One is a writer and one is a tech strategist, but then it becomes more about like, okay, why do you want this? What are you going to do with it? What do we need to be able to enable you to do? And then somebody else asks if your media coverage needs to be in English, and the answer is no, it can be in a foreign language. And if it needs to be in the US or your home country, it can be in either. So this is really where your legal team will advise you. But typically for an EB1 or an O1, we're ending up making some sort of legal argument that you are the best, I don't know, fintech, banking app entrepreneur of Brazil. And therefore, to make that argument, like if you happen to be in TechCrunch or Business Insider in the States, great, but probably like 3 articles in Brazil in the newspaper or a Brazilian fintech online magazine or something like that might be completely sufficient. And we can always use translations. So it's often easier for people to prove like, oh, I'm the best NFT creator of Madagascar than like, I'm the best startup founder of the United States. So we get to pick, and it's based on what's easy and natural for you and where you already have traction. Okay, so let's talk about, and I see more questions, which is awesome, and I can get to those. So any more questions, ask them now. But I also want to talk about the EB2. This is a green card that you can self-petition for. And basically, if you weren't born in India or China, please pay attention to this and skip the whole EB1 thing. So if you were born in Germany or Finland or South Africa or Ecuador, and you want to get a green card independently of a company, this is the category for you. It's easier than an EB1. The only reason people born in India and China have to get an EB1, I'm sorry, it's because our laws are discriminatory and you don't have the same chance of getting a green card if you were born in a different country. So the good news is for people who are not subject to the India or China backlogs, and I will also make a note here. Let's say you were born in India, your spouse was born in Kenya, you both live in Silicon Valley, and you each have your own H-1B, and your spouse has like Indian citizenship, even though your spouse was born in Kenya. You guys can actually go in the Kenya line. You don't have to go in the India line. It's based on country of birth, not country of citizenship. So please remember that if you're marrying somebody from like a non-US and non-home country for you. So if you're not subject to the India or China backlogs, please do an EB2 national interest waiver. I think it's actually easier than an O1. And you do not need to have an O1 first to get it. You could just apply for this straight out of your Stanford master's while working for a tech company on an H-1B, working there. Even if they're doing perm for you, that's going to take a year and a half right now. You can just get your own immigration lawyer to do your own EB2 for you. There's no perm. It's faster. It's easier than the O1. Once again, the Biden-Harris administration made it easier for people in STEM fields or entrepreneurship. Has a completely different framework. You don't need 3 of those categories. Basically, there's different ways to do it, but one is you have a master's and what you're doing is good for the United States, like you can get a green card. So if you're not from India or China, don't mess around with an EB1A, just get yourself an EB2 NIW green card as quickly as possible. It will make your life a lot easier, and that is the fastest way to get a green card right now. Here's my contact information and with my link tree. You're welcome to get in touch with us if you have any questions. We have a questionnaire, and please mention you were on this webinar, and we're happy to give you free feedback on if you qualify for an O1, EB1A, EB2, and AW right now, or even other visa options. I also am writing a book on everything we talked about today that's going to be published in a couple months. So if you go to my link tree, which, just scan the QR code with your phone, there's a book waitlist as well there. But we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to answer the remaining questions. We have a question of, does the O1 show immigrant intent? How long is it valid? And does the whole application need to be redone when it's renewed or transferred, just like the H-1B? The O1 is technically a non-immigrant intent visa. However, the State Department Foreign Affairs Manual regulations, in a different way than the H-1B and the L1, still allow you to try to get a green card. So it's okay to be actively pursuing a green card while you have an O1. The O1 petition is initially valid for 3 years. It can be renewed in 1-year increments or 3-year new application increments. It could be redone if it's transferred from one employer to another, if there are employer sponsors. But if you set it up through an agent with an itinerary of services, we could potentially craft it in such a way that it could allow you to change jobs within your field without needing to redo it at the renewal process. So it depends on what you want to do, but it sounds like what you're asking about is probably possible. And then you want to know if the India and China backlog situation is ever going to be fixed. Is anyone working on this? People are working on it. I recently became a member of TechNet, which is the big tech industry lobbying association. They care about this. Some Congress people just introduced a new bill that would fix this, I believe. So there's people in the House and Senate who care about this. But the reality is that immigration law hasn't substantially changed in, say, the last time a good thing happened for immigrants in immigration law was like in 1986 when President Reagan did the amnesty. There was, Clinton laws that restricted immigration in the 90s. And then after 9/11, they reformed all the agencies and they made it stricter. But it's really politically hard to fix immigration for a lot of reasons, and that would be a whole other conversation that I'm happy to have with you. It's very frustrating to me because I think it hurts America in a lot of ways to have a system that's this rigid and backlogged and frustrating. But there are people working on it. I don't know when it will be fixed. I hope to fix it in my lifetime for you if nobody else can do it first. So, but please don't let that distract you. You have your goals, you have your one thing that you need to do in your lifetime. It's going to make the world a better place. We need you here. Where there's a will, there is absolutely a way. I don't think you should wait around for it because I don't see a viable solution in the next few years. And if you're here now, you probably want a green card faster than there will be any changes. So I would say just, take personal responsibility, build your way up to an EB1. You can absolutely do it. I've seen people that had zero belief in themselves end up getting qualified and approved. So it sort of just starts with that internal decision and commitment to make it happen. But you went to Stanford. It's fine. You can figure it out. It's totally possible. So thank you so much, everybody. It was wonderful being here with you today. If you found it valuable, please feel free to let the Stanford Alumni Association know. I would love to be able to come back and do this again with them and appreciate your feedback. And if there's anything we can do to support you, you have our contact information. And just really, I wish you the best. I know you can do it. Whatever brought you here today, I'm confident that there's a way for you to get to your goal. So thank you so much for attending. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you so much, and hope to talk to you soon. All right, everybody. Bye now.